Welcome back to my channel for another lens review. And the lens I want to review today is actually a G Master lens, and it's a totally astonishing lens. It's the G Master 50mm to 150mm, and its widest open aperture is constant and an f2.0. It's a monster lens, and the proportions don't really look well on my Sony Alpha 1 Mark II with this huge lens here. But I can tell you, the combination of an Alpha 1 Mark II with its autofocus capabilities, its image quality, and its drill for speed with a G Master lens like this is a dream combination. And in this video, I explain you everything you might want to know about this lens. And I will also show sample images from a recent shooting with my photo model Stefanie. Let's kick this off. Let's start with autofocus responsiveness, and typically I go first through specifications, I show you elements on the lens and all of that, but here there are two competencies. I mentioned this in the context of my RX1R Mark III videos. Sony has two super strong competencies. One clearly is it's the largest manufacturer of sensors. So Sony sensors are always terrific. And second, they are really good in designing AI-trained autofocus systems. And look at that. I'm currently at 70mm here focal length. And look how immediately, when I half press the shutter button, this goes to Jennifer's face and I can track this in three-dimensional space, no problem at all. So autofocus system here on this camera lens combination clearly is a dream. And it's a heavy lens. I come to specifications later. It's a bulky lens, but who is this lens made for? Clearly for people in reportage and people photography, maybe in fashion. Very often in these disciplines, you actually work with 50mm, but you also want to get closer. And then you can shoot here up to 150mm, and that all with a constant aperture of f2.0. It's such an exciting lens. You hear it in my voice. After I anticipated my excitement about autofocus, let's first of all look at the elements on the lens. And first of all, I get this now in this position here. It's just a little bit too heavy for me to hold it in front of the camera all the time. We have here a zoom ring. So we have 50mm, 70, 100 and 150. Here to the noise, well, you can't hear anything because there is no noise. This zoom ring is buttery smooth and just has the perfect resistance. The same applies to the focus ring here at the very end of the lens. And then we have here an aperture ring, and you can actually shoot this widest open constant at all focal lengths with an f2.0, but you can also stop it down to f22. And the good thing is you hear clicks here. Let me try to show you. Hope you can hear this, but you can also deactivate the clicks if you want to take this for video shooting. So here is click on off. Let me switch it off and let me repeat this exercise. No more sound. Very nice, very silent for video shooters. Let's activate the clicks again, click on. And the whole mechanics, the build quality of the lens is of course fully weather sealed, is absolutely excellent. The lens offers 3 customizable function buttons, which you can use to allocate functions to. There is one at the top, there's one here on the side, and there is another one at the bottom. And that's convenient. So there is a menu entry where you can assign functions, allocate them to these buttons, which is cool, of course. We have here a manual switch for autofocus and manual focus. So we don't have to do this in the camera. Now it's on autofocus, now on manual focus, now on autofocus. And here we have actually a switch which concerns direct manual focus, and you can switch this on and off. For those of you who are not familiar with the Sony world, DMF or direct manual focus is a function, a feature you can use for using autofocus for quickly focusing and then manually overruling and adjusting the focus to your liking. And that means you can basically make fine adjustments manually after you have performed the autofocus. And you can switch this here on and off. And that's also convenient to have direct access. And then we have here the iris lock. And the way this aperture works is the following. You have here the aperture ring, and you manually steer the aperture here. But if you want to shoot in automatic or semi-automatic mode where the aperture is figured out by the camera, you can also switch this to the red A. And that you don't accidentally lose that, because it's very easy to lose it and then all of a sudden the camera is not figuring out for you the aperture, but you have dialed in an aperture which might not fit. Then you can actually lock this. Now it's not locked, you see. I can still go back into manual aperture selection, but if I push the iris lock here, we do this, boom, then here it's locked. I can no longer accidentally go from the automatic mode where the aperture is chosen by the camera to a manual aperture choice here on that ring. It's locked. If I want to unlock it, I push this button down again. And now I can switch back and say, for instance, I want to shoot at an f8 or an f5.6. That's the way this aperture lock works. And I think that's kind of all I have to explain in terms of lens elements. The design is posh. You have here the G for G Master, of course. You also have it on the other side. Everyone who is watching you shooting with that monster lens on your Sony camera will see that you have chosen one of the best lenses in the Sony lineup. And you have also here a metal plate which actually says FE f2.0 50 to 150 G Master. So all in, super cool build quality, very heavy specifications in a moment, and a lot of functional mechanical control elements on the lens body. Now let's address the elephant in the room, and that's the weight. The weight of this lens is 1,340 grams, and it's also very bulky, as you can see. But there is a but here, and if you are regularly shooting tele lenses from Sony, Canon, Nikon, other brands, it's not an unusual weight. And 1,340 grams for a lens which offers so much glass, because look at this inside. In order to keep the aperture constant at all focal lengths between 50 and 150 millimeter, you need a lot of glass. And that's why this lens is not lightweight. And I think actually from shooting Stefanie, 1,340 grams is for me still handleable, is acceptable for longer shootings, and is absolutely fine. What Sony also mentions on their website, I didn't verify it, but I believe it, is that this is the world's first 150 millimeter lens where you can shoot with an f2.0. And that is of course interesting, and as I said, is also breathtaking in terms of image quality what you can produce, because G Master lenses are not only excellent in terms of what they offer here as features, they are in particular excellent when it comes to image quality, to bokeh, you know, to sharpness, to contrast, micro contrast. Everything that's important for a lens is typically built into Sony's G Master lenses. Besides the weight, 1,340 grams, which are already provided here, what else is worthwhile to know about this lens here? And first of all, we have here 19 elements in 17 groups. You can use this for close-up shots because the maximum magnification is 0.2 times, so 20%. And you have also, and that's interesting, 11 aperture blades. And that's of course very good for your bokeh and your background blurriness. That is really something people appreciate when they open the aperture wide. We have a monstrous filter thread of 95 millimeters. So this protector here, this UV filter, is directly from Carl Zeiss. And that was quite expensive, but I needed to protect this glass. As you know, I'm always doing this. And we have a minimum focusing distance at wide angle 50 millimeter of 0.4 meter. And in the tele setting, it's actually 0.74 meter. And you saw I could easily focus here on Jennifer in the background at the beginning. And the distance here is definitely probably, I don't know, 50, 60 centimeters, something like that here. And we have here all in a really, really well developed lens with a lot of flexibility for your shooting. I mentioned before, people, reportage, every photographic discipline where you shoot more in the normal up to the tele area, because 50 millimeter is a normal focal length and 150 millimeter with an f2.0, as I said, is absolutely breathtaking. Now, what I want to do now is I want to show you sample images, because I covered autofocus, nothing to discuss here anymore. Autofocus here is super responsive, super speedy. The combination of this Sony G Master with the camera body Alpha 1 Mark II, absolutely nothing to complain. We talked about the specifications. What's missing now are real-life sample images, and I'm going to show them to you right now. We'll comment on them so you can conclude with your own verdict whether this lens, in terms of what it offers to you, might be for you and your lens portfolio, or you might want to say, no, this lens is too bulky, is too heavy. I don't need that. There are more lightweight lenses from Sony I can use, which maybe don't carry me to a 150mm focal length with an f2.0, but where I actually can do the photography I'm looking for. Alright, so as a pre-remark, this lens is also good for landscape. Don't get me wrong. I mentioned reportage, people photography, fashion, everything that needs a focal length starting in the normal area like 50mm and then into the tailor area. But this is also good for landscape. In particular, if you want to bring the foreground and the background closer together and want to appear the background larger than it usually comes out when you shoot with a wide angle lens. So there are a lot of, I think, applications for this lens also in landscape photography, maybe even architecture. But here I used the opportunity to shoot with Stefanie. You saw our preparations before, and I want to just make a couple of points on the image quality because that will, of course, interest a lot of people. And I don't spend too much time with these images. Let me just get you a couple of them closer. Let's take this one here, for instance. And if you look here, this is absolutely pinpoint sharp, but it also nicely renders the skin texture and the skin color. So this is a crop by 100% now, and this is shot widest open. All these images I think are shot widest open at f2.0 because this lens is made to be shot widest open based on the G-Master properties, which are always excellent. Of course, if you would do landscape, you will want to stop it down to an f8 or even further stopping it down. But here for people photography is absolutely nice. And if you look at her dress here, this is super nice and blurry. Look at that. I mean, this is actually a good outfit for that shooting. Very nice in terms of these light effects we have there, but then her eyes, and I was shooting everything here with eye detection. Then you see how sharp this is. You see the structure inside her eye and the iris, which is very nice. And you see her nose at the tip is already a little bit blurry again. So you get a very thin, a very shallow depth of field here. This image is shot at 150mm, so in the far out tailor area this lens can offer. And of course, then you get all these effects. And we have here a little bit of smoke in the background that gives the background a little bit of texture. I like that. Sometimes I also make it more diffuse, you know, by actually letting the smoke out and then creating some wind. And then it gets even more diffuse and even more smooth. But that's the way the images come across. And that is the common pattern we have here. Pinpoint sharp on the eyes if the image updates in Lightroom, and everything else where the focus is not sitting at 150mm and f2.0 is already blurry, but with a very nice blurriness if you look at her dress here and the way the light is picking up on this structure on her dress and blurs it out. Continuing, I think this is a nice one here. And you see the smoke kicking in here. As I said, I could have made this a bit more diffuse. It's a bit more tight here, a bit more dense and a little more airy on the right hand side. But you know, we just wanted to test that lens and look at this. This is breathtaking image quality. And the Sony Alpha 1 Mark II anyway is for me a total flagship camera winner. You know, I mean, you know that I shoot many brands. I love Leica, Hasselblad, Fuji medium format, you know, I even shoot Canon and Nikon, of course, what have you. But the Alpha 1 Mark II, for everyone who is after fast, super fast autofocus, absolutely brilliant and precise subject detection and eye autofocus and then tracking and staying sticky on the eye. This is really, really cool what you can do with this lens, and the image quality as it comes across, but also the colors, the skin texture and tone, just beautiful. Look at that face within the smoke and how the camera lens combination is capturing this. Very, very nice. Let me see. I think there were a couple of points I wanted to make. This is a nice one here. Let's use this one to make a point. If you look here, you see both eyes are sharp, and even here you have sharpness. Well, this is the same focus plane here, I guess, despite it's covered by hair. I had another one which I wanted to show. Let me see if I find this again. This one here. Let's look at this one here. Have a look here. Here her face is a little bit turned towards the right-hand side eye, and the right-hand side eye is a little bit blurry inside, although the eyelashes and eyebrows are fully captured. But the left-hand side eye, where the focus is sitting, is covered by hair, but still underneath that, super, super sharp. And I think these AI-trained methodologies that Sony implements in their cameras, they have reached a level where you really could only dream of some years back. That is really good. And here, she turned her face a little bit. Look, here her head is turned a little bit with a bias towards the right-hand side eye. And then you have here a little bit of blurriness in the iris, and where the focus is sitting on the left-hand side eye is brilliantly sharp. Now she turns her head a little bit, and now both eyes should be in the same focus plane. So if we look here, now they are both kind of sharp. Almost sharp on the right-hand side eye, but definitely sharper than on the image before. Look at that difference. And it really is absolutely essential if you shoot with 150mm and widest open at an f2.0 that your autofocus system can keep pace with these capabilities. Otherwise, it will be very, very hard to get a clean and crisp focus on one or the other eye or on both eyes. This would be almost impossible to achieve with manual focus, I think, in particular if your photo model is moving a little bit in the scene. The depth of field is so thin and so shallow that you need to rely on these eye-capturing algorithms Sony implemented to get these images done. Let me go back here. Let me show you a couple of more. I think here's nice. Stefanie here started to smile. I mentioned already several times in videos with her. That does not happen that often, but if she starts to smile, it's actually quite nice. Look at that. And here I darkened the background. Look at this image. This is now shot at 68mm. Let's get to a few other focal lengths so you get some impressions. 68mm. This one here is 95mm. If you look here, very, very nice. Look at that. Lightroom needs to update. Now we are here. Very nice. And also here, behind the hair, there is nothing that holds Sony's autofocus back from getting sharp where you want the focus to sit. This is 62mm here. Let's have a look. Very nice. There's a lot of smoke now in the air. And also here, autofocus does not get irritated in any way by any distractions, be it smoke or something else, or halfway hair in the way. This looks good. 150mm. I just love 150mm for portraits and half body shots here, as you can see. Very nice. This here is 64mm again. And look at that. Now it's updated in Lightroom. It always takes a moment to think. Lightroom needs to update the image and then it's there. Look at that. What a nice picture capturing her eyes and her face. Here this is 92mm again. 50mm. I don't think we had that so far. Let's have a look here. Very nice. I think this camera lens combination, look, what can I say? I can only keep my thumbs up and tell you, if you are a Sony Alpha shooter, then this lens, if you are in a discipline where you would need 50 to 150mm, this lens is a dream, right? It is an absolute dream on a Sony Alpha 1 Mark II and will be an absolute dream on a Sony a7R Mark V and other Sony Alpha cameras. Just very, very nice what you can do with it. Another one with 50mm shot at ISO 100 looks really good to me. And I think that's almost it. I don't think there is anything more to say or to mention. I think you get the point, you know, for people photography, reportage, but also, as I said at the beginning of the sample images, landscape. You can use this lens for creativity in all different ways. So all in, if you can live with the fact that this lens is bulky and also has substantial weight, you get here a dream camera lens combination, right? Sony Alpha 1 Mark II, flagship camera from Sony, super responsive autofocus system, AI trained and super reliable. And then this lens where you can shoot with constant widest open f2.0 aperture up to 150mm. And it actually starts with 50mm, which is a normal focal length and a typical focal length for reportage and for storytelling and for people who want to set other people in scene. All right, that's it. That's all I wanted to say and show. I hope this was useful for you to come to conclusions. If you are a Sony shooter, doesn't necessarily need to be an Alpha 1 Mark II. I think this lens will do a fantastic job on a Sony a7R Mark V. Then hopefully with my little presentation here, you got some data points for your decision. If you liked that video, don't forget to drop me a thumbs up. Stay tuned on my channel. There's always more to come. Thanks for watching. Stay safe and healthy. And of course, peace out.